Welcome to my unboxing and first look at the Z77X-UD4H from Gigabyte. This is sort of a lowest that I would recommend motherboard, because when you go any lower than this, you start to compromise features that matter, and this is where you start to get into the features that I think matter the most without spending an exorbitant amount of money on things that most people won't use. So for example, you've got the support for all the latest Core i3, i5, and i7 processors. You've got their fully digital power design, as well as their 3D dual UEFI BIOS, which basically makes it almost impossible to brick one of their boards by flashing the BIOS or whatever else. You get Crossfire and SLI compatibility. It does support Virtue MVP, which is basically the way that you can use the onboard graphics on your CPU in order to transcode video and use your dedicated graphics for gaming. PCIe Gen 3 is a given these days. Ultra Durable 4 is pretty much all the old Ultra Durable stuff, in addition to the new glass fabric PCB that makes it humidity resistant. All digital power, so CPU, graphics, memory, and the Uncore, as it used to be called. I have no idea what we call it now, apparently VTT. And then they talk a little bit about load line calibration versus not load line calibration, although it's very debatable. You know, lots of people believe you should use it and shouldn't use it. Here's a closer look at what their PCB design looks like. Intel Smart Response allows you to use an SSD to cache your hard drive to make it go faster. Surprisingly few people use it, but they should. It's awesome. And their Easy Smart Response utility is actually the easiest way to set up Smart Response, and it only works on Gigabyte boards. I have used it before, and it's awesome. Electrostatic Protection is cool. So what it amounts to is, for example, many motherboard manufacturers will do one fuse for sort of a bunch of USB ports, whereas Gigabyte does one fuse per port. So if something gets zapped, at least you're going to lose less of the functionality of your board. Included accessories are pretty bare bones. So you got 4 SATA cables, an SLI bridge. Remember, Crossfire bridges are included with your graphics card. A Gigabyte sticker, multilingual installation guidebook, a user's manual, a driver disc, which you aren't going to use, and you're going to download the latest off the manufacturer website. And of course, a color-coded I/O shield. Look at all that. Dat USB 3 that be all over this board, because it has not only the Intel USB 3 that comes with the Z77 chipset, but also third-party USB 3. Gigabyte has done such a good job of cleaning up their color schemes over the last couple of generations. So I'm going to start in the place that I usually do, which is the CPU socket. Got lots of room around there for large coolers, as well as lots of cooling for your MOSFETs. So it looks like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So that's probably like an 8+3 phase power design or something along those lines. Either way, it's using yeah. Quite frankly, with an Ivy Bridge CPU, as long as you've got a good quality board, which is again why I sort of recommend starting at that UD4 range, you're not going to be limited in your overclocking endeavors by your CPU power delivery unless you're going sub-zero or doing something exotic. This is ample for air and water cooling. We've got a single 8-pin CPU connector up here, which is all you need for an Ivy Bridge CPU. You've got a clear CMOS button, as well as a reset switch and a power switch up here at the top right. You've got 4 DDR3 slots supporting up to 32 gigs of DDR3 memory, your 24-pin connector in its ideal slot along the right, and you've got an auxiliary SATA connector. This is kind of handy if you are installing multiple high-powered graphics cards. So if you're going to throw a couple GTX 690s in here or something, I do recommend plugging in a SATA connector, and it'll give a little bit more power to those graphics card slots and reduce the risk of burning out any of the pins on your 24-pin here. Front USB 3 is over here on the right. This is where I do like to see it, although a right-angle connector would be even better. And over here we've got SATA 3 off the Intel chipset, SATA 2 off the Intel chipset, so 2 of those and 4 of those, and more SATA 3 off of a third-party chipset. We've also got a front post indicator LED, as well as the front panel connectors, and the BIOS switch, which switches between BIOS 1 and BIOS 2, which are 2 physical chips on the board itself. 3 USB 2.0 headers are down here on the bottom, as well as the trusted platform module and front panel audio. No FireWire on this board. That's starting to disappear, even on fully featured boards like this one. And for our PCI Express slot loadout, I think it's pretty solid, actually. So if you have a single dual slot graphics card installed, that's going to leave you with 1, 2 PCIe 1X, two PCIe 16X physical and a PCI. However, bear in mind, guys, that this is 16X physical. If you populate both of these, it's going to be 8X, 8X. This is an 8X slot. And this one is a 4X that runs off the chipset itself as opposed to off of the CPU. So I wouldn't recommend populating this with a graphics card. And this PCI slot will be covered by a dual graphics card solution. But what that means is you're going to be left with 1, 1, and 4 left for further expansion, which if you're running a dual graphics card setup, you probably have a pretty high-end computer anyway. So I understand Gigabyte's rationale when they did that. In terms of fan connectors, we got 1, 2 4-pin, 3 4-pin, 4 4-pin, 5 4-pin, which is pretty good, and you have full support for configuring those within the BIOS. Matte black PCB, which I've started to take for granted. I remember I used to rant and rave about how awesome it is, but there are other little details that matter. Check out the way Gigabyte's using screws as opposed to plastic push pins to keep on all the cooling. That means that no matter what happens in transit, your board will probably arrive in a working condition. And finally on the back, check out all that USB 3. You've got 6 USB 3.0 ports, DVI, VGA, HDMI, and DisplayPort out. PS2 keyboard mouse combo port is included. Optical audio out is included. 2 eSATA ports, Gigabit Ethernet, and 7.1 audio. And check this out, Gigabyte's also built in a dedicated USB keyboard and mouse ports here. This is to increase compatibility, as well as sometimes what manufacturers do is they include ports that are optimized for a 1000 Hertz polling rate, which gives you that extra little tiny edge in terms of responsiveness, assuming your keyboard and mouse do support that feature. So high temperature protection, on-off charge, so even if the computer's powered down, you can charge devices using USB. And all Japanese solid caps, which we've again started to take for granted at this point. And oh right, don't forget Gigabyte's 3x power for their USB ports, meaning that you can charge devices faster and you can run more devices, I'm pointing at the Sata ports, you can run more devices off their USB ports without using a powered hub, just passively. Don't forget to subscribe to Linus Tech Tips for more unboxings, reviews, and other computer videos, and thank you for checking out this one on the Z77X-UD4H.